Hey everyone, welcome to today's Lunch and Learn. I'll give everyone a couple of minutes to join in here. I know we're starting a little bit late, so I'll give everyone some time to get logged in. And for those of you who are currently logged in and who have never been a part of our Lunch and Learns, just to give you a brief overview of what we do here, this just allows you or gives you the opportunity and the forum to ask any questions that you have. Maybe you're building and you're running into, how do I approach solving this issue? Or maybe, I don't know, any decisions related question that you have, feel free to ask those and we will do our best to get those answered. And if we cannot get those answered on today's call, then we will reach out to the right resources and follow up with you with any of those answers. So with that being said, I'll give everyone the chance to either put those questions in chat or put them in the Q&A feature. And as well, you can come off of mute and ask any questions that you might have. And Alex, I see you have your hand raised. Did you have a question?
I have 3 questions.
Okay.
Okay, so one is just kind of like architecturally, I'm using a security group to go and get everyone's email kind of thing, and send an email to everyone in the group, but that doesn't really go well between development and production. So what's like the design that should happen there? Should that be like kind of set up as a constant?
So what are you seeing when you move it to production?
Oh, well, it can't find the group, right? Because I'm providing it a GUID that exists in development but doesn't exist in production.
Gotcha. So when you are moving projects from environment to environment, the development groups are not being, or the groups that are in the development environment, are those not being imported into the production environment?
Oh, I guess so. So you're saying that if I export those rather than create them, I might have better luck, kind of thing?
Yes, absolutely. And that is something that you can do. You can create, let me close out of the slide here. So let's say you have a project and you know that you have a certain group that you want to declare as a dependency. You can come to this dependency, come to declare, and you can add an element registration and you can actually pick that group that you want to apply. And then that way, anytime you export it, you'll have that group available.
Okay, great. That's numero uno.
Okay.
So number 2 is when I create a database integration in Decisions to, like a local database, it's asking me to provide a password, a username and password. It asks me to provide a connection string.
Sure. So if you come here and go to database integration, is the database type, is it the Microsoft SQL Server?
Yep, can be, yep. Yeah, exactly. Use agent, blah, blah, blah. But my question is that, is there any way that I can gain access to the connection string kind of programmatically? Like, we don't like the idea that this is a hard-coded password. And so we would like to be able to use some kind of tool to cycle the password from time to time, and are wondering whether or not I can actually change that connection string using a flow.
Ah, I see. Now that's not something that I know off the top of my head. If any of my other panelists who are on the call, if they know if this is possible, please feel free to jump in here. But in the meantime, what I'll do is I'll drill into our internal services and see if we have steps for updating that connection string. Integration, I'm missing it somewhere, internal services. Ah, here we go, internal services. And let's see, database integration service. I'm assuming it's in here. I might not be right. So let's see, I see we can create a connection string. Let me take this down rather than me trying to test a bunch of steps and breaking something here. Let me take this down as a question to reach out to our support team and see if they've done something like this before.
Yeah, okay, great, no worries, thanks.
Yep.
And so the last question is I'm just kind of wondering about the nomenclature of setting up Active Directory. Like it says, one of the things that I need to provide is an elevated user and an elevated user password. And I'm just kind of wondering what like when we're saying elevated, when I need to configure something on my Active Directory server, we're just looking at something that needs to basically be able to read and write to Active Directory.
So that might be, I'm trying to Google elevated user for Active Directory right now.
Hey Jessica, you'll need somebody to be able to read Active Directory because most users can't read Active Directory natively.
Okay.
So an elevated per user can you can control where they have read write permissions, but they need to be able to read the groups in Active Directory so the decisions can actually push out the group and do group policy, group permissions. Because if it's just a normal user, they won't be able to read Active Directory groups.
Gotcha. Thank you, Tyler. Does that help, Alex?
Yep, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. And welcome, Tyler.
Thanks, Jess.
If you would like, I know I'm putting you on the spot here.
All you,
but
all you.
Happy to do so. And while you guys are getting some other questions in, I am just going to type out that question, Alex, that I need to find an answer for.
Okay, great, thanks.
Mm-hmm. All right, let me check and see if we've had any other questions come in. I don't see any questions yet. All right, and while everyone is still maybe thinking of questions that they want to put in chat or put in that Q&A, I'm going to, out of curiosity, I'm going to continue to look through some of these steps here and see if I can find that connection string step. I have put the question into our internal support chat service, so see if I can get an answer here. And if anyone on the panel or anyone on the attendee list sees a category that they want me to go in and look for where that step might be, feel free to throw it out there. All right, and I'm not seeing any questions come in here. I'll give it another minute or two. Oh, here we go. Is there a recommended way for picking a type record from a configuration entity, for example, and storing the ID on a request entity that is looking for a more streamlined drop-down list? And Christopher, can we kind of drill into this question a little bit more?
Sure. I think what I'm finding is that we sometimes have a what I'll call a work item record, and it may have a type and some other kinds of things attached to it.
Sure.
And then we'll let the user define what those types are and some of these other things in a separate table, well, separate entity. And so what we find then is I find myself wondering, it feels like I have to, if I'm just recording, say, the entity ID in that work item record, in order for it to display to the user, I then have to kind of collect, what this ID reference is, and then the list of what you can pick from to put that into a drop-down list appropriately. And then on the other side of the form, kind of, put the package back together again in terms of what did the user change, and then putting that change back into the record. And I found myself wondering, is there perhaps a more streamlined way to do it that I'm missing? Because it seems like I could do, a fair amount of unpack, put together the pick list and then put it back into the record kinds of things.
Let me chew on that for a little bit. So essentially, you have two separate tables, and you're relating them by the entity ID from one table. You're storing that entity ID that gets created as a field in the separate table.
Right.
And then you have a drop down that's displaying.
So it displays everything that's part of what, that first table, that work item piece. Some of the like who entered this and when do they need it by and stuff like that. but then it'll have like, and what type is this? And so we'll have it from the drop-down list. We'll show the field, like the names of these things, even though the underlying record stores the ID rather than the name.
I think it might be. I
So
think I'm having a hard time picturing it. Go ahead, whoever's going to talk.
So are you looking to drive the second drop down by the top record? Because that's where I'm confused. I think Jessica's confused too. What are you looking to drive from this top record?
Well, so the top record has, essentially an ID of that other entity.
Mm-hmm.
Then when I load the form, instead of showing that ID to the user, I show them a drop-down list. And so that drop-down list needs a couple things. It needs the list, which is, comes from that other entity. It's, reasonably simple enough to get, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then I have to construct a record, so then I have to also get that record to provide as this is my current selection. And on the other side, and then when the user says, you know what, save these changes, I will need to turn around and look at what the user selected from the dropdown and then move that ID back into the item record, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, that works well. I mean, that's sort of what I think as a reasonably straightforward mechanic to do it. And what I find myself thinking though is as I have 2 and 3 and 4 of these kinds of things, it starts to feel a little clumsy. And I didn't know if there's, if that's just part of, you kind of have to, on your way to the form, do all those gets, right? I don't know so I just found myself wondering, is there a way to streamline that, or is that just, be happy to, do all those gets and probably use a mapping step afterwards to take care of the selections?
Are you in version 6 or what version are you in?
I'm in 6.
With version 7, we have active data flows, which might make it a little simpler in streaming. It's in all those get messages and doing all of that. But with version 6, I can't think of a better way to do that. Can you, Jess? Because he's calling 3 tables and have to update those list mapping to those 2 or 3 tables.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think
So
there's
you're having to do a bunch of data flows.
Yeah, that's what I think is happening as I kind of look at this and saying, okay, this solves some problems, but then it's starting to make the, stand up the form and then, deal and then take care of the save activity afterwards is growing in complexity. I'm scratching my head thinking, I wonder if there's something I'm missing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, are those the only thing that might make it easier, and this change your data structure, would be the nest. Since you already have that one entity record with the entity store with it, if you want to nest, it creates more records, but it would be to nest one of those data types inside of each other if that works for your data flows. Then you could call one entity and get all the second.
So instead of storing the ID, just store the entity inside of the entity record.
Yeah. But then you're going to have this, to parse through, because then you would have, okay, I don't know how many entities you store within entities. It could be a list of entities. You could create a list of data types, which means you still have the one main record. Then you parse through the list. You're still parsing through a list, but at least it's not all those gets.
Well, right. So the way to, so one piece of streamline you're suggesting is, avoid the gets, just
have your one get for the main top record and store in the top record a list of all the entities.
Right. And so then that would have all those, and that would save the secondary gets, as it were.
And only one update, not to do list mapping, only one update or one create data or save entities, update entities after it, and not have to do multiple list mapping and all that.
Because in that case, then the selection would very naturally map in some sense straight back into the master entity here.
Correct. But that also change your data structure a little bit. I don't know how your reporting works, and there's a lot of different variables when you change your data structure that I'm just unaware of.
Right. I mean, yeah, I mean, it would be disruptive to reports. I kind of see where you're going with that. I don't know that I've already been thinking about maybe the reports can't be held harmless anyway. So that doesn't necessarily deter me.
Mhm.
I think though, if someone were to go edit one of the configuration items, right, that's not going to update the corresponding entities that have embedded it, will it? So in other words, one of the things I worry about that suggestion though is that if one of those configuration records gets an edit,
Mhm.
then what I have in the master entity are snapshots prior to that edit.
No, because the master entity, the list inside that master entity will include the GUID from decisions, which when you update one of those corresponding records, the GUID won't change in decisions. It's going to update a field in that data type, but not the actual GUID. The decisions hold the internal key, foreign key, whatever you call it, the internal GUID decisions has of that record. That's what your time between the two. So as long as that GUID doesn't change internal GUID and decisions, it will always keep that relationship and have the most updated record. Does that make sense?
Right. That does make sense. I'm just trying to think of. So if it's a field reference, the decisions engine actually just stores the ID as opposed to packing up the entity into some sort of strange thing. Like what I see it does that with a list. Like if I have in the master entity a list of something else, like a list of string, it will sort of pack it up in a strange, some sort of encoding from what I can tell. And that's what that is. But that's not what happens when we actually have another entity embedded in the data structure.
But correct, because it doesn't pack it up as a GUID, but it should save when you nest data types, it's going to notice, okay, I'm creating this list of data types, and each data type, any record in the line of a data type has unique, you don't see it because it's hidden from, you can see it like, imagine a folder ID, a unique folder ID that's just long string of GUID with alphanumeric characters. The data types, if it's an entity, still has that long GUID, you just don't see it. You can expose it in reports, expose it some things, you can expose it, just like a folder ID or that as long as that GUID doesn't change, like you're not creating a new record, or as long as you're updating that same entity file, that GUID never changes. So it will still say, okay, it'll have those updated record, because you're really not changing a snapshot by nesting them. You're creating a relationship, like imagine a SQL table with a foreign key relationship. Trying to go back to SQL, you're creating a SQL relationship between those two tables inside decisions. That says, okay, now I have this one GUID which has a list of table of all the other GUID IDs below in this other table that connects to. You're creating a foreign key relationship. It's really what you're doing. If that makes sense. I'm trying to explain it in SQL terms.
Sure. I'll have to explore that. Thanks.
Something to explore, absolutely. To put it in your dev environment, QA environment, explore it, and to make sure your reports and everything for the data structure turns out, because it will change your data structure throughout your entire flow, because then you have the one master record and you can build off that one master record a complete flow, because it'll actually have nested in all those other records automatically.
Now, that would make me think though, yeah, so that will be curious in terms of what does it look like in the report? Will the report sort of have by decisions magic access to the linked fields from the other table, from the other entity?
The master will, not the master, not the parent would, but not the child.
Okay.
Because the foreign key is stored with the parent, not the child.
Right. So if I'm doing a report of parent, right?
Then technically it would have access to everything linked under that data type, as long as you store it as a list.
Okay.
So it really creates a list of those data types and those data strings below it inside that nested.
So it ought to be that the reports will fill in some of the things that we want to see there.
Correct. From the parent perspective, not from the child perspective. The child report, you still report in the child data type,
Mm-hmm.
no problems, but it just won't have that link back to the parent.
Sure.
Now using some more mapping, if you still did want to have that parent-child kind of reporting aspect where you click on, your master record, and then you want to see the nested types in it in a child report, you can still store that entity ID or that GUID from the parent or master record within the individual other nested structures in there, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, so it's sort of like using that mapping step to just go ahead and copy the ID into a separate field for other use, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
Though the question that prompts is that actually going to be necessary? I'm sort of wondering if maybe that part can be skipped.
Right.
All right, that gives you some food for thought. Thanks.
Thank you, Tyler. Great job working through that. All right, we do have another question here from Jackie. I have a report that lists all requests assigned to the current user, which I use the current user filter to accomplish. How do I accomplish this if the current user is part of a group assignment? Great question, Jackie. So my understanding, and I might be wrong here, is it should still, even though you assign something to a group, the report itself should still know all of the, or be aware of all of the individual users in that group. Are you seeing that this is not the behavior that when you use the current user filter, if it's assigned to a group, those assignments aren't showing up?
Yeah, I just did one like just before this meeting, and it didn't show up.
Okay, so there's another, I guess, kind of depending on where these reports are being displayed, you could do, let me create a report real quick. And I'm sorry, I did not mean to cut you off. I heard you talking as I started talking. I apologize. I'll let you finish.
Okay. It's all right.
All right. So what you could do, let's see, assigned to, I might have to create some assignments. Where is assigned to at? I'm missing it. Assigned. Maybe is it all assignments that shows the users? No.
The other thing is, though, it also has to work with just the current users assigned as well, like whether it's they're in a group or whether they're specifically assigned.
Okay. I don't know why assigned to is not showing up here. Let me try a different assignment source. And are you reporting on a process folder?
Yes.
Okay.
From a process folder. Yeah.
From a process folder. Okay. Now, what I can do is I can submit a kind of a feature request to our product team to have that current user filter work for groups. But in the meantime, I don't have anything great on this server, so let me create one real quick.
Lola.
because I know you're saying that it has to work for the current user, whether it's assigned specifically to them or the group. So I was thinking we could do a field filter and add the group name, but then that wouldn't work for current user. So let me just do some playing real quick. All right, so we'll set up our process folder. We'll create a dummy task. I'm gonna assign it to the admin group. All right. See if it saves that time. There we go. All right, I'm going to run this flow so I can create an assignment for that group. Let me create a report on that type. And now I should have the assigned to current assigned user, and it's showing up as admin. So you used entity filter of, no, you used folders have assignments assigned to me. So this looks like it might actually work. Let me run the report. Yep, there we go. Okay, so Jackie, if you use the, there is a filter under folder filters, and if you use folders have assignments assigned to me, that's going to pick it up at the group level and the account level. So I just create an assignment that's assigned to the administrators group, and I'm logged in as someone who's part of the administrators group. So if I add this here and I run this report, it's still going to show me this particular record where I could work that task, even though it's assigned to the administrators.
Okay, great.
And then if you want to make sure it's only showing current ones, so assignments that haven't been, or folders that have current assignments, meaning those assignments haven't been completed, you can use folders have current assignments assigned.
All right, but wouldn't it wouldn't, okay.
So the first, oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I would expect that if it's, it wouldn't show up unless it had a current assigned user, right? So if it was a completed or canceled or whatnot, it wouldn't show up anyway, right?
So it would on this first filter. So for instance, if because this says folders, well, let's test it. Let me go ahead and run the report, and I'll go ahead and complete it. There we go. Yeah, so it's actually only going to show, well, folders have assignments assigned to me. Let's refresh the preview, run the report. Yeah, so it's only going to show, oh, yeah, it is showing up. It's just there's no current assigned user. So then what you might have to do is just add another filter that, you know, filters out any reports where, or anything where if you go into field filter, you can say like, you know, current assigned user is not empty.
All right, great. Yeah, I think I did that. I think I've done that on state already.
Okay, awesome.
So perfect.
Cool.
Okay, well, thank you.
You're very welcome. All right, let's see. I don't see any other questions that have come in. So I think we'll go ahead and wrap things up. And just as a reminder, there will be no Lunch and Learn tomorrow as it's Friday, but we will resume the Lunch and Learns on Monday next week. So we'll see you guys on Monday. And thanks everyone for the questions and the great conversation. Have a great weekend, everyone. Bye.